Hello there and welcome to Forever F1 for today's live news show. And we are gearing up for what should be an absolutely epic weekend in Bahrain come Friday. So much to talk about from Suzuka, to be honest. And whilst it might not have been the most entertaining Grand Prix, definitely not an all-timer by any means. Lots that you can sort of take away from it. And I think it does set this weekend very, very well because there's a lot of pressure, I think, on McLaren to maybe be more aggressive with their strategy. Could we potentially see a bit of a driver revolt happening in the team? Could Oscar Piastri be getting tired of the fact that he is consistently matching Lando Norris's pace and looks like he could be as good of a contender for the World Drivers' Championship as Lando, and yet maybe not being treated in sort of the same way. Also going to see what's going to happen with Ferrari. A huge weekend ahead for them. They've not really competed so far, but they were targeting Bahrain for a big upgrade and a potential opportunity for them to step up. We've now seen that Max Verstappen can keep up and beat the McLarens. The question is, can they keep up that momentum? And Mercedes, who are floating around, being consistent, but yet to really sort of find themselves truly in the mix, to try and win a Grand Prix so far this season. Coming up on the show, we're going to be talking about the new Ferrari upgrade. We're going to be talking about where Red Bull found some gains, as well as the fact that there is going to be a huge rule change coming up that they are very much on high alert. And also be talking about Haas stealing a driver from Alpine, and that has been confirmed as well. We'll also talk a little bit about Oscar Piastri and, what's going to happen with him and Lando the better he gets and the more consistent he gets in terms of creating that very awkward situation. And he was quite open about the fact that it was the right decision to prioritize Lando on Sunday, but I don't think that's going to last for long. I think he's good enough actually to compete, to be perfectly honest. So if you have any sort of feedback or any sort of questions, put that down in the comments below. Please do smash like on the video, subscribe to the channel as well if you are new. Let's get into it, shall we? So Max Verstappen storming to a victory this weekend and looked like the most Max Verstappen victory ever, wasn't it? He was just an absolute different class to everybody else. And I think that, it was a huge moment for Red Bull where it sort of showed you that, yes, they might not have the best car. I don't think he's quite driving the tractor that some people have implied he is, but that if they can just give him enough marginal gains, that he's got enough to be, he's good enough himself. He was world class throughout the weekend, to be honest, and from qualifying to the whole spiel, he just looked a different gravy, to be honest. So let's and I think that's we'll talk a little bit about why some in terms of the marginal gains and whether we can sort of read into it a lot or whether it's basically a once-off. Just trying to quickly pull this up. So let's talk about, shall we, in terms of the marginal gains that they found. And they did do some big updates in Suzuka. So basically, it wasn't big updates, but tiny updates, which created a big chance. So in terms of what basically happened is that Red Bull did do an upgrade package, which consisted of a whole bunch of different components, which mainly resolved their cooling requirements, with a revised engine cover arrangement and enlarged rear brake duct outlet prepared in order to deal with the demands of Suzuka and upcoming events. It's quite interesting, actually. So basically, the main thing is they're trying to manage the airflow externally over the bodywork and the likes of that, but also the removal of the louved cooling panel on the side of the engine, reducing the associated loss that may be accrued here. The main big difference is that apparently the new rear brake duct outlet, and let me sort of look at the exact word. Here we go. Is going to be basically has blanking options. So that means that the size of the outlet of the rear brake duct outlet can be adjusted for each circuit, which is huge because we're now moving into lots of different types of circuits, lots of different types of weather, for example, in a short space of time. So obviously Japan was quite warm, but on the Sunday was raining. You're now going to Bahrain, where you expect to see very high track temperatures, then Saudi Arabia, then you go to Miami, and then you're into Europe, and basically the conditions could change quite a lot. When you go to Italy, for example, it's often very wet. So basically they create a system where instead of having to try and basically change it and make big alignments for each sort of race and having to replace the entire thing, they've got something they can basically just tweak to suit the circuit and to the conditions of the circuit, which gives them a far more versatility. And that's one of the main things that they've managed to do as well. They also made some adjustments to the rear suspension, which basically also aligns the FO both locally so that has basically been a huge change for them. What was quite interesting is that they were set up very differently over the weekend. So Yuki Tsunoda, for example, was set up to have far more downforce compared to Max Verstappen, who opted to have less downforce. And basically use a similar setup to what he had in Australia. So the main thing I think, I suppose, from a Red Bull point of view, is that they're learning more about the car. I think they're starting to understand where their deficiencies are and where they need to improve things, and also what is going to work right now. Obviously there are going to be some big upgrade packages, and this is kind of usually how it starts. A team usually starts season well ahead, and then other teams start to make gains. And we've seen this previously. We've seen it with Red Bull last year, and even the year, even that the controversial season when Lewis Hamilton lost on the final day. We saw that Red Bull and sort of the dominance between the different sides of Mercedes slowly started to fade away. And often teams will start off very strongly, and then other teams will start to catch up. So this is where I think when we talk a little bit about McLaren, where they've lost their opportunity to really capitalize. So the big thing is that Red Bull are starting to understand the car a lot better, and they've started to be able to sort of set it up for Max Verstappen to be quick. And as soon as you start doing that, you're then in a very, very strong position, because you've now got the best driver on the grid in a car that really suits him and that he understands, and that's only going to give you good results. Not the best car on the grid, but it was a slight step in the right direction for Ferrari, because it was the highest finish this season so far. Charles Leclerc's top four. In fact, I think he's finished top four or fourth, in fact. Every single year at Suzuka for the last 4 years, or something stupid like that. But yeah, it is the Ferrari's best finish of the season, even including the 5-6 that was where they got disqualified. So I suppose, promising signs of inverted commas, but I think we all just know that the Ferrari just can't compete right now, and is just nowhere near being as competitive as we would like it to be. But this weekend is a big weekend, because we are set to see a new floor coming into it. Now, the problem is, and what the worrying thing is that the new floor, and with the likes of it, there's no guarantee, for example, that they're not going to potentially fall foul to the incident that they had in China, where they got disqualified. So at the moment, they are expected to introduce the new floor. It's going to drop the ride height, and apparently that's going to create more efficient downforce. So the big thing, this is going to really hopefully help Ferrari in terms of Hamilton's in particular. So he was obviously won the sprint and then got disqualified from the Grand Prix. And now going into this new floor, they're hoping that this will be the net game they need to be able to compete in the Grand Prix against the other sides. They said that apparently beforehand, there's basically been a lack of balance and pure performance with the SF25, and the new floor is going to trigger a better stability and better balance in the Ferrari, which is going to basically be made to mainly sort of link to their wind flow. In theory, the reports are that they want to basically make the center of pressure forward with and better rotation through the corners, and basically reduce the understeer issues that we have seen the Ferrari complain about throughout the season. Now, the big problem with this as well is that in terms of the qualification, basically it was because after the post-race inspection, the underfloor plank of Hamilton's Ferrari had suffered from way beyond what is permitted under the regulations. Now, the issue is that they're creating more downforce and creating more pressure, and should they do that, there is the potential to have more wear on the skid block, which is part of the floor, and obviously is becoming a part of it. So, he was found, the plank assembly was found to be found at 8.6 millimeters, 8.6 and 8.5, and the minimum thickness needs to be 9 millimeters. So there was far too much wear and tear basically on it. Now, I mean, it's ludicrous. I mean, it was 0.4 of a millimeter. You can't even fathom that. Actually, you can't even really look at it. Realistically, you do actually need a microscope to be able to sort of see that kind of difference. But it is something that they've acknowledged. It is something they've had to work with. And I think the main thing is, and this is what Lewis Hamilton basically said, he says, we will slowly progress the car. It'll be interesting to see when people get upgrades over the season. We've got a lot of work to do to be able to close the gap in the top cars. The top guys, they've got 3 or 4 tenths in us, so we've got a lot of work to bring upgrades for that. Now, the floor is expected to be a big part of that. And I think the main thing is that we all know Lewis Hamilton still has it. That sprint victory, for example, showed that he still has it in him. You've just got to give him a car that can compete. And I think this floor is hopefully a big step towards giving them that exact sort of type of car where he can compete. Give him a car that's, I think he's a better driver than Lando and Oscar Piastri, for example, still. And so I think if you can give him a car which is just about as competitive as McLaren, I think that he can have a go at them. He's obviously got the experience and he's got the pedigree. Max Verstappen, for example, he's getting absolutely everything out of that Red Bull, which is not as good as the McLarens, and he still managed to find a result over the weekend. Speaking of the Red Bulls, what I want to talk about is... Here we go. Let's go back to this one. They are apparently very... cognizant of the fact that there's going to be a new rule change coming in ahead of Barcelona that Red Bull principal Christian Horner has spoken about. And basically, they're going to be tightening the regulations regarding how far the rear wing slot gap is able to open, your sort of DRS. So they basically talked about the idea of flexi wings, and we've seen this before, where wings seem to be opening a lot more than what they're supposed to be done, or supposed to be able to. And there's also going to be a big front wing change as well. So Red Bull's been team principal Christian Horner's been talking about it, basically saying, I think if there's an unknown as to how it'll affect the different cars, and he says you can see that the operating window of these cars is very, very narrow, and that front wing change is quite a significant one. So it'll be interesting to see how and who it affects. There's no guarantees. So at the moment, basically they've been looking to try and solve the rear wing issues, and now they're looking at the front wing. And that's going to be a big thing ahead of Barcelona this year. So in terms of the level of flex, it was going to be dropped from 50 millimeters to 10 millimeters. And that's basically what's going to happen. It'll be interesting to sort of see how that affects the different cars. So Horner said that we know areas of the car that we need to improve, and the whole team is very focused on that. But I think his championship is going to be maximizing your opportunities. I think he's right. I think, even, for example, if they don't have as fast a car as the McLarens, if it can just be in the mix, for example, and take the rare opportunities you get to try and score points or win Grand Prix, they've got to do that. Once again, they're still not managing to do this with Yuki Tsunoda. But that, I think, will change, hopefully, in the next race or two. Then some very interesting news is this has been announced. So, former Alpine driver Ryo Horikawa has officially been announced as the Haas reserve driver for the remainder of the 2025 season. The 31-year-old Japanese driver is part of the Toyota Gazoo team and has done lots of testing for McLaren, for example. He's driven for Alpine. This was actually him at the Alpine where he's done testing like that. He's been part of lots of free practices and the likes of that. He currently competes in the FIA World Endurance Championship as well as the Le Mans, which he's won a couple of years going back in 2022. He's been in hypercars, he's been in Super Formula, he's been GT, for example. He's a very experienced driver, and he has been named the official Haas reserve driver for the remainder of the season. He will be featured in the first practice session on Friday, where he will take on Ollie Behrman's car and have a go. So obviously then we'll see Ollie Behrman, who's actually been very impressive. Now the big thing I think is that you look at these two drivers in Ollie Behrman and Esteban Ocon. Esteban Ocon has not been at his best in recent years, and I think growing a bit of pressure on him. Now he's far more experienced than Ollie Behrman. Obviously he's a rookie, but he's 28 years old and not had a good start to proceedings so far. If you look at the Japanese Grand Prix, he finished 18th, 7th in the Chinese Grand Prix. That was mainly due to the Ferraris messing up. 13th in Australia. So, he's gotten a bit better. Well, he's there and thereabouts occasionally, but I think in the last few years he's been kind of underperforming to what I think he could be. And then Ollie Behrman, you've got a very inexperienced driver. So I think it's very important in these sort of situations to have someone with a lot of experience, because you're never going to be able to find. It's difficult to find, especially as a Haas, a Formula One driver with decent amount of experiences. You're not a Mercedes who can have Valtteri Bottas sitting in the pit crew, or a Ferrari who can have Zhou Guanyu as your reserve driver. So you've got to be quite clever about the type of driver you have. Whether we'll see him actually drive a Formula One race, wait. But he's gone from McLaren to Alpine and Haas. He's been around all those three pretty quickly. I think it's actually his third team in the last like 5 or 6 months. So very, very talented is Hirakawa. And I think this is also a bit of a challenge to the Haas drivers, that if things aren't going well, we've got a driver who they genuinely believe can get a lot out of that car and can potentially do the job. So putting a bit of pressure, I think, on Ocon more than Ollie Behrman, but interesting to see how they sort of react to this and what the dynamics are going to be. Let me know what you think about those stories down in the comments below, as well as any of your predictions for the Grand Prix this weekend over in Bahrain. We'll be live for all the sessions coming Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we'll see you guys all then. Please just smash like on the video. Please